The city sanctuary status was, quote, not an invitation for people to come. What's a welcoming ordinance if you're not telling people to come?
States, cities, and counties use this as an excuse not to cooperate with ICE.
And the Immigration Reform Law Institute has put out a list of the 10 worst sanctuary mayors in this country. Welcome to No Border, No Country. We're talking about sanctuary mayors today and the destruction they're causing in this country. Joined by Judge Matt O'Brien, as always. Matt, tell us a little bit before we jump in. The Immigration Reform Law Institute has put out a list of the 10 worst sanctuary mayors in this country, and we're going to dive in here and get into it. But talk a little bit about sanctuary policy in general and why it's so destructive.
So there really is no such thing as a sanctuary city. It's a word with absolutely no meaning. What happened was in the 80s, a bunch of church groups in Cambridge, Massachusetts decided they were going to declare themselves sanctuaries based on the old medieval practice of giving people sanctuary in churches. And this morphed into this entire movement where city councils or states declare themselves as sanctuaries from immigration law. Of course, there's a problem with that. First of all, sanctuary in Europe was gone by about the 1400s because it turned out to be a bad practice, just encouraged criminal behavior. Second of all, in the United States, the way federalism works, immigration is a federal responsibility. There's Arizona v. United States, Supreme Court case that says states don't have any right to legislate about immigration, and it belongs to the federal government to enforce. So you can't just unilaterally declare yourself exempt from any federal laws you don't like. Texas can't declare itself a Second Amendment sanctuary and say we're not enforcing any federal gun laws. And, Massachusetts can't decide that it doesn't like environmental laws anymore because fishermen make a lot of money there and say, we're ignoring all the federal fisheries laws. You can take as many oysters, lobsters, whatever you want. You just can't do it. So this is just, the whole thing is a silly virtue signaling mess where states, cities, and counties use this as an excuse not to cooperate with ICE. And they act as if they're doing something that's principled that has some basis in the ancient English common law. And it's really just disobeying federal law.
Now, this list that Early's put together, some of these names are going to be very familiar. Others are not. I think the purpose was to shine some light on some of these lesser-known sanctuary mayors to show the destruction that they're causing in their communities. So let's just get started here. So number 10, we're going to work from 10 to 1. 10 is Darrell Steinberg from Sacramento. This is one that probably most people have never heard of if you don't live in Northern California. He gave a speech when Florida Governor Ron DeSantis was sending some of his best and brightest out there. And let's look at a clip here and see what he had to say about this.
And so just to clarify for the audience, when you say best and brightest, Governor DeSantis had a boatload, plane load, bus load, whatever, of illegal aliens that the federal government just waved through. And the problem at the border is that the law clearly states that you need to have pre-applied for a visa and be admissible to the United States in a particular classification. None of the people currently showing up are admissible, and yet the federal government is just waving them through. So DeSantis and Greg Abbott in Texas said, we didn't ask the federal government for this, and our states are going to wind up bearing a disproportionate share of this because of our proximity to Mexico and to Latin America. And so they started sending these people to sanctuary cities and said, you asked for them, here they are.
Yes. I said best and brightest with tongue firmly planted in cheek there.
Yes, indeed.
Okay, let's hear what Mayor Steinberg has to say.
So when this occurred on Saturday and today, what I'm most proud of is the fact that our community, our community-based organizations, our city, our county, obviously our governor who leads in every way here, the Attorney General, we have been working together over the last 48 plus hours to make sure that first and foremost, that the people who are scared, who are vulnerable, who are flown here.
Okay, let's pause right there. First thing that jumps to my mind, he thanked the governor of California for leading in every way. That's your first clue that his compass is way off.
Yeah, I mean, this is absurd. California has been at the forefront of this whole sanctuary movement. When California says, come here and we're going to give you everything for free, that's a giant magnet for people to come. So that in and of itself is absurd.
Yeah. Okay, let's see what else he has to say.
Lure of jobs and or services that they know that they are safe and that they will be well cared for, and we will follow through whatever is best for them. All
right, so Brian, one of the things that absolutely shocks me about these constant claims is he's talking about these people like they're off of Emma Lazarus's poem on the Statue of Liberty. It's the poor, the tired, the hungry masses yearning to breathe free. A vast majority of these people are not particularly scared, and they're not particularly perturbed. They come here, the Border Patrol regularly finds them with brochures in their pockets from social services agencies. And, this is one of those things that drives me nuts because the mainstream corporate media and the anti-borders left have this dueling narrative of their own about migrants. And when migrants are coming here and they're not in the United States, they're the poor, downtrodden, hapless people who need the assistance of Chardonnay-swilling white yuppie liberals in order to be able to accomplish anything. Then the minute they cross the border, they're the most entrepreneurial, everyone's a future Nobel Prize winner, Congressional Medal of Honor earner, the person who's going to invent the next Google and cure cancer. And it's like both of those things cannot be true at the same time. And so it drives me nuts when it's like, oh, these poor, scared, tired people. No, these opportunistic people who knew that California was giving away freebies and that their free apartment, free food in California would be better than whatever they were getting at home in their failing country showed up. And for political gain, this buffoon decided to exploit them.
It's also so interesting that they look at everything through an emotional filter. They cannot look at results, as in how much is our city hemorrhaging in resources to bring on this problem that we invited. They're always on the side of the angels. Anyone who does something contrary to that is in league with Satan, basically. And to accuse DeSantis, in this case, of ulterior motives and he's grandstanding and this, we can talk chapter and verse how these sanctuary mayors grandstand for their own political benefit.
Well, and then he goes on to say that, his behavior highlights the best in human nature and DeSantis's highlights the worst. Of course, he's not taking into account the fact that he just introduced all of these people who no one knows who they are. There's an incredibly high number of them that at this point have been found to be gang members, cartel members, foreign spies, members of foreign military agencies, members of terrorist groups. And purely for the virtue signaling bump that he gets out of local news media, he's very happy to just let all those people into Sacramento, the capital city of California, and turn them loose and let them run amok with absolutely no concern about the potential effects that these people are going to have on crime in the streets, making Sacramento a victim or potential target, I should say, of terrorism. And he doesn't take into account any practical things. There's an unfortunate holding from the Supreme Court called Plyler v. Doe, which says that all illegal alien children in the United States, despite being here illegally, are entitled to a free public education. So, he's responsible for running the city of Sacramento. Has he taken into account how much this is going to cost in the schools? If the school system has to add, another 20, 30, 40, 50, 60,000 children to the school system, children who by definition are not going to be able to speak English and might never have had an education comparable to what we get here in the United States.
Okay, let's move on. So we're on to number 9 now. This is the 9th worst sanctuary mayor in America. Another name that most people probably never heard of, Ron Nirenberg from San Antonio, Texas. Now, for those of you who may not know, the perception nationally is that Texas is this Wild West state with this governor who's at war with Washington, and he's shipping migrants all over the country. However, much like Austin, Texas, San Antonio was one of these pockets of wokeness in Texas.
Yeah, it's like Boston on the Rio Grande. Beautiful city, beautiful system of canals. What a lot of people don't realize is San Antonio is actually at the border as well. It's right down the highway outside of the city limits is a checkpoint where one can go across the border to Mexico. So this is a city that sits right at the source of the problem. It's a city that makes a lot of its money from people working for the federal government involved in immigration enforcement living there. Large number of people from the Border Patrol, from CBP, from ICE, from CIS, and from the military, Bureau of Land Management, a whole bunch of different agencies that are involved in enforcing immigration. And it sits right on the border. So you would think this would be a place that would have a clue at how deleterious uncontrolled mass migration can be, but no, they've got a virtue signaling, anti-borders individual in charge.
Yeah. Now, this early report it's really cool. It's got a little section on each of these mayors in case you don't know why they're on this list. But for Nirenberg, it says he described his city as a leader in terms of making sure it's seen as a welcoming community and that first and foremost is compassionate. Shouldn't first and foremost by the city leaders be make sure the city's financially solvent, making sure they're taking care of their actual residents, things like that?
Yeah, citizens of the United States who pay the taxes to fund the city. And then number two, right after that, should be law-abiding. And, if you listen to the doublespeak here, he's saying, we want to make sure we're welcoming. Well, enforcing the law is not being unwelcoming. And put that in a different context. If this were murder we were talking about as opposed to a violation of the immigration laws, any politician that said, well, we want to make sure we're welcoming to people who feel the necessity to take a human life, everyone would go, what is the matter with this nut? But you have somebody saying, not enforcing the laws against trespassing into the United States is not being welcoming. Therefore, we're going to encourage the people who are breaking those laws and portray ourselves as the milk of human kindness for not enforcing the law against them. It's absurd.
Moving right along, we're up to number 8. Another name, not a household name, Reed Gusciora from Trenton, New Jersey. I did not know this guy existed until this report came out, but apparently he's got quite a record. Here's a line directly from the report. Despite 28% of Trenton residents living in poverty, the city has continued to prioritize illegal aliens over the well-being of its residents. During his first campaign for mayor, Gusciora boasted about his support for legislation awarding driver's licenses to illegal aliens. So there's the prioritization right there.
So, Brian, you and I both grew up in mill towns, and so you know from personal experience what it's like to the economy of towns like that when the manufacturing jobs go away, they go overseas, and the factories dry up, and it kills the whole town. The downtown shopping districts disappear. People don't have money to spend. Trenton is one of those places. And it was, classic American city between Philadelphia and New York. With all the classic American industries. And its economy got clobbered when all of the typical jobs that Americans do started going overseas. So it's the ultimate in offensive ironies that the mayor of this place is now going, we welcome all the illegal alien lawbreakers who came here and now want to take American jobs after those jobs fled to Latin America, Asia, all kinds of places where these people are now deciding they don't want to live anymore.
You would think New Jersey politicians would be a little more anti-sanctuary given that their neighbor to the north, New York City, has given them so many. There's got to be a lot of spillover there, right, from the migrant problem that New York City's having right now?
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, I lived in Jersey City across the river from New York when I worked in New York City, and the place was very migration-friendly city for a significant portion of its history because it's literally a stone's throw from Ellis Island. But all the old-time migrants that came there in the 30s, 40s, until they closed Ellis Island, from the late 1800s on to, say, the 1940s after World War II, were all people that settled there lawfully. And, what you're seeing now is increasing numbers of Latin American migrants moving into the former immigrant neighborhoods. A lot of the people that came in the waves of immigrants have moved along because of what they're seeing. And this is a problem throughout New Jersey. So, is this politicians wanting to stay in politics and they need some kind of tax-paying constituents there? And if they can't keep the communities attractive to Americans, they're happy to take illegal aliens? Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of that going on. And I'm sure a lot of it is just this open borders, virtue signaling crap that we've been talking about in all of these places where somehow enforcing every other law is good, but enforcing immigration law is bad.
At number 7 in this list of shame, we have Mayor Mary Ann Baldwin from Raleigh, North Carolina. Now, we know that area very well from our work because Raleigh includes Wake County, which we derisively refer to as Woke County because of their incredibly irresponsible detainer policy or anti-detainer policy, I guess you would call it. Tell us a little bit about Wake County.
Well, this is an interesting one. So I have a number of good friends that live in Raleigh and elsewhere in Wake County, and I've been going there for years. When I started going there about 35 years ago, it was a quiet little urban community surrounded by bedroom communities. It has since grown, largely because of the tech triangle, what they call RDU, research triangle. So there's a whole bunch of tech companies there, and with tech companies, the opportunities for jobs as office cleaners, things of that nature started to increase. And then the bounds of the city have been growing outward to meet the agricultural areas. And so they had a boost in people looking for agricultural work. And the city has grown. I think the population in the greater Raleigh area is now something like 400, 500,000 people. And I don't know, it seems to be that when the tech companies arrive, the woke political views arrive with them. And this notion that's being pushed by people like those involved with Facebook and some of the other major tech companies that immigration enforcement is bad has taken root in that area. And now you have the county government doing all these things that encourages illegal migration. Of course, that's also been the scene, Wake County, of a whole bunch of disturbing crime committed by illegal aliens against U.S. citizens.
Now, for someone who might say, well, that's the county leadership, not Raleigh, North Carolina, Mayor Baldwin co-authored an op-ed in 2021 writing that illegal immigration makes us stronger. So there you go. Included in that op-ed, she wrote, "Citizenship for these undocumented immigrants is urgently needed. It's vital for our city and our state." It's vital for the city.
Well, here's the thing. As we're constantly being reminded in the news these days with election cycles coming up, we live in a democratic republic. And so the will of the majority is taken into account by the elected representatives, and they're supposed to take action based on that. The law of the United States is not that people who want to come here are self-selecting. They show up, and because they've graced us with their presence, we instantly give them citizenship. The law of the United States is that if you have complied with the law, entered the country lawfully, and have complied with all of our other laws, like paying your taxes, not committing crimes while you're here, then you're free to apply for citizenship. And after we have vetted you, made sure that you're a person of good moral character, made sure that you've lived here for a suitable amount of time, then we can approve your citizenship application. But if you're an uninvited guest who shows up here with your hand out and then misbehaves, why are the American people obligated to give you citizenship? And I think perhaps we should pose that question to the mayor sometime and see if she's willing to answer it.
Coming in at number 6 is our first big city mayor in the list, Karen Bass from Los Angeles. Now, I don't think it's possible to be the mayor of a city in California without being pro-sanctuary, but what do you know about L.A.?
Well, L.A. has been at the absolute forefront of this. It started back in the late 80s, early 90s with an internal rule, which is kind of like general orders in the military for the LAPD, telling them not to cooperate with the Immigration and Naturalization Service. And it's just expanded from there. What else is there to say about California? I mean, it's bankrupting itself by welcoming illegal aliens because of the state's proximity to Mexico, which is the gateway to the United States for the rest of Latin America. It's been overwhelmed, perhaps more so than even similarly situated places like Texas and Arizona. And it's, I don't know, it's like an addict who knows that he or she shouldn't go back for the heroin, but they just can't resist because it feels so good. And that's what this is about for California. It has nothing to do with practical policies. It has to do with being able to pat themselves on the back and feel good about how wonderful they're being to all of these people who are showing up as uninvited guests.
Now, this is good. The report talks about Bass here, and it says, like many mayors, she villainized Greg Abbott for daring to send some of his illegals elsewhere. But after he sent some to L.A., well, prior to that, she had said her city was not motivated by fear or hate. After some of them started arriving, she said the city's sanctuary status was, quote, not an invitation for people to come. Isn't that exactly what they've said, that they welcome what's a welcoming ordinance if you're not telling people to come?
Well, how are you offering sanctuary if you're not telling people to come?
Right.
I mean, the whole sanctuary comes from the concept that back in the Middle Ages, when most things were barred at night, most doors and windows, the church door was open 24/7. So it's a bit hypocritical to say we're a sanctuary city, but that doesn't mean you can show up uninvited. Well, you've just said that you're ignoring the federal laws that say you can't show up uninvited. So what does it mean to be a sanctuary city if we're going to offer sanctuary, but only on our terms when you show up invited by us?
Our next mayor, coming in at number 5, is Mayor Muriel Bowser from the city we're in right now, Washington, D.C.
You would think in the capital of the free world, where the headquarters of the Border Patrol, CBP, U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services are located, that you should somehow be at least comfortably separated from some of this. But that is not the case. When you walk down the streets here, every third or fourth person you see is painfully, obviously, not from the United States. We have a gang of recently arrived migrants from Latin America riding unlicensed, uninsured motor scooters in and out of the traffic here and perpetuating small crime at a furious rate. And Muriel Bowser and the D.C. City Council, in their infinite wisdom, have attempted to pass legislation saying that anyone who lives in D.C. can vote in the D.C. elections. Of course, all D.C. elections are federal elections by definition.
Another thing about Mayor Bowser, Matt, she signed the bill that legalized illegal voting in the city, and she was enthusiastically behind it. No one twisted her arm. And what of that?
Well, we sued her about it. And I don't think that went particularly well for her side because there are some constitutional questions about it. So we'll see how it all shakes out in the end. But why would you think that in D.C., which is filled with foreign diplomats, a lot of their foreign staff members, everyone who lives here knows the place is full of foreign spies because you don't send your spies to Peoria. You send them to where the stuff that spies need to know about is going on. Why would you think it would be a good idea to give voting power to foreigners in the capital, where issues of the capital's security and the handling of embassy staff and the education of foreign, everybody from military attaches to ambassadors' children might become an issue that could be voted upon? It doesn't make any sense, and it just shows that Muriel Bowser is a low-rent provincial politician who doesn't understand the importance of her position or what she's involved in. She happened to get lucky and find herself as the mayor of D.C. I'm not so sure she would be capable of, frankly, I don't think she could run the dog catcher's office effectively, but she certainly is not doing a great job with the capital of the free world.
Now, here's a quote attributed to her in the report. Listen to the sanctimony in this comment. We are a sanctuary city because we know that our neighborhoods are safer and stronger when no one is afraid to call on our government for help and when our police can focus on protecting and serving. Now, you and I both work in this city. I see homelessness rampant here now. I can't help but wonder how many homeless shelters in this city are being occupied by people that have no right to be here. I see the police appear to be overwhelmed. There's crime clearly on the rise from just a few years ago. Is it making us stronger here in D.C.?
No, it's not making us stronger. Marek Hodakiewicz, who's been on the show before and is a friend of the podcast, is on the board, or at least part of the board of advisors for the Memorial for the Victims of Communism, and is affiliated with the organization that has the Memorial for the Victims of the Ukrainian Famine that took place, I think, either just before or during World War II. And he told me that they had to spend money to have those monuments cleaned because the homeless people were urinating and defecating on them and sleeping on them overnight. First of all, I don't understand, what is humane or kind about people living on the street and taking care of their essential functions on the street? And second of all, how does that kind of disrespect for those kind of monuments show the humanity of this city? Those are both monuments to literally millions of people who were killed by a lack of democracy and a lack of effective government, and we literally have people peeing on those.
We're coming down the home stretch here. Coming in at number 4, Kelly Girtz from Athens, Georgia. Remember this guy?
I do indeed.
Most people in this country, probably a lot of people in Athens, never even heard of this guy until this year. But one incident changed that. An innocent college girl was jogging near the campus at the University of Georgia and disappeared. She was later found deceased. An illegal alien was charged with her death. He gave a press conference that is hard to unsee once you see it. Let's take a look.
Thank you very much. I want to say that we center our work here in Athens, Clarke County, in people's humanity. And part of everybody's humanity is the expectation of human dignity. While 2019 was not that long ago, you might remember the dynamic we were living in the late teens in this country, where you had the President of the United States speaking in the most vile terms about people who were foreign born. And you had that notion metastasizing in places like Charlottesville.
This is an invasion!
Man, what do you see when you see that guy giving those answers?
Well, Brian, just to start here, he begins by talking about humanity and human dignity. The thing that he's forgetting is this individual who, and nobody talks about this, but I have delved into the reporting on this and done the study. This guy who is accused of killing Laken Riley didn't stop her because he wanted to have a conversation or, ask her where she bought her jogging shoes. It's pretty clear that it was either a sexual assault or an attempt to perpetrate a sexual assault, which nobody in the media has wanted to talk about. So I hear him talking about the human dignity of illegal aliens. Well, this illegal alien was not concerned with Laken Riley's human dignity when he was attacking her and then bashing her skull in with a rock. So what kind of a moron gets up in front of his constituents and talks about the situation like that when he knows that an innocent nursing student who, by all accounts, was dedicated to serving her community and people in need in it, was just bludgeoned to death by a foreign gang member who shouldn't have been here in the first place?
Why are people like him, these anti-borders types, they're so obsessed with language. They're so obsessed with, oh, somebody said something that's so mean, referring to former president. How about results? How about whether your citizens are safe? Isn't that far more important than someone's feelings maybe being hurt by something that might be true?
Well, facts are inconvenient and people react to feelings. And so that's what's going on here. But then what's even more of a killer is as he moves on, he goes,
No pun intended.
You know, you have to take into account in the late teens, you had the President of the United States using vile language to talk about these individuals. No, Donald Trump said these countries are not sending us their best people. We seem to be getting a large number of murderers and rapists. Well, this absolute chucklehead is completely incapable of understanding that what he's characterizing as the use of vile language is Donald Trump's prediction and Donald Trump's observation about these individuals being proven in his district. What just happened is one of those murderers and rapists that Donald Trump talks about attempted to rape somebody and then murdered her in his jurisdiction. And yet all he can see is the kumbaya sad story for, the potential Sergey Brin tech entrepreneur, genius, illegal alien migrant that I'm still waiting for because I've been doing this for 30 years and I haven't seen any of those people show up in the country. So it's unbelievable. I'm happy to say that our study, our attempt, we filed a Freedom of Information Act request under the Georgia Freedom of Information law to get emails between Mayor Girtz and the Athens-Clarke County Sheriff. And shockingly, he defended his sanctuary policies to the sheriff who was asking, are we still officially going with this? Then he scolded the sheriff and schooled him on how to deal with public relations problems because he characterized this as a PR problem that would eventually go away. And I'm proud to say that our coverage of this appears to have prompted a number of people in the community to look at who they elected and consider recalling him.
I wonder if anyone would ask Laken Riley's family if they think the language is too strong that we're using to describe these people and whether we're getting their smartest and best and most industrious.
Well, sadly, Brian, people did. And unfortunately, I think the family was traumatized. And so they put out a very anodyne statement saying that, they did not want the unfortunate situation that happened with their daughter to tar and feather all migrants. But it's like, we've done other shows on this. And it's not simply because we have migration that crime is going up. It's the way that Joe Biden chose to handle migration. When the Border Patrol and CBP and USCIS and ICE are all allowed to do the job that they're statutorily required to do, then we vet these migrants and we arrest them and hold them accountable when they break our laws. That hasn't been happening. We've been waving everyone in, no idea who they are, no way to reasonably vet them. And what happens is things like this. Inevitably, you are going to get opportunistic predators seizing the opportunity to come into the United States and prey on people here. And why was this guy here doing this? Well, because his home country of Venezuela has become a communist dictatorship. And if he pulled that kind of stuff in Venezuela, the police would shoot him without a trial. And so he's coming here where he knows that useful idiots like Mayor Girtz are going to be advocating on his behalf, and he knows that there's a justice system that requires that he receive a trial and be treated humanely. It's sad, but it's true.
At number 3, the mayor of Denver, Colorado, Michael Johnston. Another not household name, but he's making a name for himself with some of the absurdities coming out of Denver. They recently were in the news for gutting a lot of their services, including police, Department of Motor Vehicles, Parks and Recreation, all to accommodate the migrants.
Yeah, this guy should be a household name for how badly he's dealing with things in Denver. And, I think the gutting of the police services is key, because it wasn't bad enough that all these sanctuary jurisdictions were discouraging local police from cooperating with ICE. I grew up in a family full of local police officers, and the fact is that local cops know about immigration law, and local cops can figure out when people are unlawfully here. Back in the day, when we took policing seriously and people were walking a beat and thought it was their responsibility to know everything in the neighborhood they were charged with protecting, they knew all kinds of important stuff. So state and local law enforcement agencies should be partners with ICE in enforcing the immigration laws. The people who want the borders open for their own agendas know full well that the local police make ICE more effective, and so they pursue these policies on purpose to make the border less secure and make it easier for people to enter the country unlawfully. You would think that in Colorado, that had, I believe, at least 2 major mass shootings, weren't committed by immigrants, but one was in a movie theater and one was, of course, at the Columbine High School. You would think that the political leaders would be increasing police services, increasing law enforcement's ability to deal with crime, and that they would be cooperating with whatever federal law enforcement agency can enhance their ability to protect their citizens. But instead, they're doing exactly the opposite.
We're up to number 2, Matt. These people you are going to recognize.
Number 2 in the parade of horribles.
Number 2 in this list of shame, Eric Adams, New York City. The epicenter of the migrant crisis in this country. I am a little conflicted about having him here. I mean, he deserves to be here. However, as an NYPD, a former NYPD captain, I believe he was, he should know better. And I think he does know better. And he's been saying things in between the lines that suggest he does know better. But he's concerned about his political survival, and you can't survive in that town unless you bend the knee to certain interests, and he's more than happy to do it.
Well, here's an interesting secret about New York that most of our viewers may not know. Even when New York has been most pro-sanctuary, and I think this is not quite as true now as it was in the past, but when Rudy Giuliani, in the wake of September 11th, was saying, well, listen, we want to make sure that we catch the terrorists and we make sure that everybody gets the death benefits they should get, we're not going to go after every illegal alien we encounter. Well, the city of New York was actively cooperating to rush illegal aliens out the back door with all the major federal task forces. I know this because I was on the New York, New Jersey high-intensity drug trafficking area task force when I was an attorney with ICE. I got temporarily assigned on a detail there to serve as counsel for a couple of projects that they were working on. And not only the New York City Police Department, but the New York City Corrections Department and representatives from a couple of other law enforcement agencies in New York City and all throughout New York State were represented on these task forces. So it's not unusual for New York politicians, Republican, Democrat alike, to be talking out of both sides of their mouth on this issue. And I think it's mainly because they want to appeal to certain political constituencies. Problem is now that New York City has abandoned their police department. We have seen situations a couple of summers ago where people were attacking the cops with water and dumping it on them. I talked to some of the old-time police officers that I knew, and they said there was no way that would ever have been put up with when they were police officers walking a beat. And then you had more recently the Venezuelan kid with a huge criminal record before he ever got here, shooting at the police officers, and then he was released under New York City's no-bail criminal justice reform. And think about that from the message standpoint. What says we're not serious about enforcing our laws, like letting somebody enter the country illegally? While he had no authorization to be here, he was involved in a crime. When the police responded to the crime, he shot at the police. And then the criminal justice system lets him go, gives him a pat on the head and says, "You're back on the street, my friend." I mean, if that doesn't say we're not serious about enforcing our laws from the border to the interior, I don't know what does.
You and I spoke on the last show about how safe New York City was during the Giuliani
It
administration.
was unbelievable.
Yeah. So after that, we had Bloomberg, who was kind of the same. It was maybe starting to get away from that a little bit, but still fairly safe. Bill de Blasio was just an absolute disaster as a mayor there. I mean, he might be the worst mayor in the history of that city, and that city's old now.
Yeah, he may well be. Bloomberg took law enforcement seriously.
Yeah.
As a somewhat heavyset guy who enjoys my food, I think he was more interested in persecuting people that ordered large sodas and more than 2 slices of pizza.
His war on sugary drinks.
Yes,
Remember that?
Exactly,
Yeah.
which clearly benefited the city. But he kept most of Giuliani's policing reforms in place. And that was all a system that was referred to as broken windows. And it said, what we want to do is we want to set the tone. We want to create a climate in the city where people are indisposed to commit crime because they know there will be consequences. And the best way to do that is to enforce everything from public drunkenness and jaywalking statutes all the way on up to murder statutes. And I mean, it was unbelievable. When I lived in Jersey City and commuted to work in New York, you did not want to cross a street other than at a crosswalk unless it was a special event at like Radio City Music Hall and the police had set up cones across the street to facilitate people across, because a very unhappy NYPD officer was going to issue you like a $50 or $75 jaywalking ticket, and heaven help you if you got 3 or 4 of those and hadn't paid them. You'd walk in a city office to get something done, and they'd go, "Well, we can't help you. You need to go down to the court and pay your jaywalking tickets." I mean, it was really shocking. But it was effective because people were afraid to violate the laws. Now what you have is gangs of Venezuelans who entered the country here illegally with criminal records, meaning they're by definition inadmissible to the United States, who are preying upon people, running around on motor scooters, stealing their cell phones, and assaulting them.
We gone through mayors 2 through 10 here, and shame on all of you. And we've done a lot of content here. Number 1 requires its own episode because
Yes,
there's
indeed.
just so much content just for number 1.
And we have something special for
Yes.
our viewers.
So not to leave you hanging, but it's going to be worth it because we're going to have a whole episode just about number 1, and it's going to be a barn burner. So
And when we come back, it's going to be a special guest who is local on the ground in Chicago and knows Chicago from the pizza to the baseball teams and everything in between.
you just gave away the city. Congratulations, you made it to the end of the podcast. If you'd like to learn more about the Immigration Reform Law Institute, go to irli.org. If you found this information useful and you'd like to support the show, go to irli.org/podcast. You can also hear this show on Apple Podcasts, Rumble, and Spotify. And don't forget to check us out on all the major social media platforms. Thanks again.